This case speaks to the incredible interagency coordination and cooperation it takes to get drugs off our streets. To the colleagues I stand with here today, thank you for your support, your partnership, and for the great work that all of you do. I would now like to introduce Chief Daniel Cameron of the City of Newburgh Police to say a few words.
Thank you, Major. I'd like to stress upon the teamwork that's involved in an operation like this. I would like to personally thank all the involved agencies for their efforts to make Newburgh a safer place. I'm confident to say that every one of these agencies shares the same vision that the City of Newburgh Police share, which is to make our streets safer. It's a collaborative effort. The City of Newburgh Police Department requires collaboration in order to get our job done. I feel our partnerships with all of our law enforcement agencies are extremely strong, so strong that I'm here to say that if anybody's involved in the criminal element in the City of Newburgh, you have every reason to be worried. And those in the City of Newburgh who purport to be there for the community but in secrecy are contributing to the problems associated with drugs and violence, we're going to find you, we're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to expose you. The collaborative effort that took place yesterday was something that was very public. Everybody saw the multiple agencies going together. However, every day in the City of Newburgh there's a collaborative effort. Some the public sees, a lot of it the public doesn't see. So we are going to continue our efforts to make Newburgh a safer place. Where there's drugs, there's violence. And it is of no coincidence that our crime analysis office has recognized that that area on First Street has been a long-term hotspot for violence. But it doesn't end with the sweep that we did yesterday. There's continuing efforts. In fact, right now as we speak, there's a team of police officers, firefighters, and code enforcement officers that are on that section of First Street going through the area trying to determine what can be done as far as making it a safer place. So code violations will be issued. We'll be working with landlords to clean up the properties because crime is attracted to areas where it appears that nobody cares. So we're going to continue those efforts, and I appreciate all of our partnerships with our law enforcement, and we will continue to do that until Newburgh is a safe place. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce District Attorney David Hoovler.
Good morning. Again, it's a pleasure to be here today and take the podium with such great partners in law enforcement, as the Major said and as Chief Cameron said. It is a pleasure to work with these professionals day in and day out, that they put the time and effort in to make our communities better, but also they put their personal safety at risk many times, particularly yesterday. I had the pleasure yesterday of watching this operation take place. The operation itself encompassed an entire city block and involved at least 8 search warrants being executed simultaneously or near simultaneously that resulted in the arrests that you have seen. So I'm very thankful to the state police commitment to our communities, as well as the City of Newburgh Police Department, and as well as our partner agencies that you see here, the town of Newburgh, as well as the town of New Windsor and Woodbury. Without them, this operation would not be possible. Also, without the people, the assistant district attorneys in my office that made it possible. I'm just going to take a few minutes now, and I'm going to walk you through the organizational chart of this drug trafficking organization. As I previously stated, this was a heroin trafficking organization, and it shows just how sophisticated these organizations have become and the level of investigation that it takes for law enforcement to penetrate them to gain enough evidence that we can successfully prosecute them. In this particular case here, you have really 2 primary suppliers. The first primary supplier of heroin is Christian Tejada. He is based out of Howard Beach, New York. He was the supplier to Ray Rivera, the name that you heard prominently said here today, that ran a boxing club in New York, who pretended to be a friend of the community of Newburgh, who pretended to want to help people, but secretively, subversively, he was involved in supplying the Walking Dead heroin. It has a particular stamp on it. That's a brand name that everyone knows. It's known for its quality. He was supplying Mr. Rivera, and Mr. Rivera was supplying Earl Melvin. Earl Melvin was the centerpiece of this case. He operated the block. His drug trafficking organization controlled the entire block that was hit yesterday by the special operators and the SWAT teams and the emergency response teams from the various towns and the state police. Mr. Melvin supplied other individuals that were below him in varying quantities, and those individuals supplied many of the street level sales individuals that you see here, some of which are still wanted. We are looking for, I believe, 6 individuals presently that we're still looking for. What you have to understand is, in this particular case, we had over 20 purchases into this organization where undercover officers or people working with the police made purchases directly into this organization. Without doing that, we would not be able to work our way up and filter through and discover who the major supplier was, who the ringleader was, who exercised command and control. And again, as I said, Earl Melvin did that on the block, but he was supplied by Ray Rivera, who was supplied by Christian Tejada, who was also out of Howard Beach. Additionally, that was stamped heroin that was prepackaged. In this case, there was also loose heroin that was brought in. Loose heroin means that it's not packaged, it's in its loose form. And sometimes it even involves fentanyl. Mr. Melvin was supplied by Angel Rodriguez, Jr. of the Bronx, who was basically supplying him. He was supplying the loose heroin. So we had 2 sides of this drug trafficking organization. We had the stamped prepackaged side, we had the loose side. And as I said, both sides at times contained fentanyl, the very dangerous synthetic drug that often causes overdose and kills people. What you have to understand about this organization is that at every level of this organization, the individuals that are selling were making a profit of 100 to 300%. There's no other business in our society that you reap a profit like that. That is why these individuals do that. That is why they're mercenaries of death. On that note, I will point out the last thing that was a little unique to this. There was numerous professional businesses or businesses involved, such as the All-Star Barbershop, Sadiq's Deli. Mr. Rivera also used his boxing club. So that's what we are up against. Here in Orange County, you will continue to see this type of collaboration, this type of cooperation. We will continue to do these cases more and more. Every one or every drug or package of drugs that were taken off the street here doesn't go to somebody, which means somebody gets a chance to live. So I commend all the officers that were involved in this, particularly all the ones that you don't see today. You see all of the chiefs, you see the commander of our local community enforcement team from the state police, you see our chiefs, but I assure you that when that raid took place yesterday, there was probably 150 officers on the street, some of which were part of special operations groups, some of which were patrol officers. The people you never see that made this case happen, they're the undercover officers, they're the people that work behind the scenes, they're the ones that even deserve more credit. On that note, I'll turn it back over to the Major for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hula. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer? And if I can't, I will turn it over to one of our partners.
In the course of developing the intelligence of surveillance, any chance you guys may have developed any leads in any of the open homicides in Newburgh?
With every one of these operations, we have an opportunity to talk to the individuals that are arrested. In the streets of the city of Newburgh, we do have issues where people aren't forthcoming who witness crimes. However, anytime we deal with cases like this, usually is the time that we have interviews with people and develop leads into those cases. It's too early to tell in this particular takedown where that's going to lead, but it is something that we do on a regular basis, yes.
And how many raids are we up to this year in the past couple of years in Orange County?
You're into at least double digits, I believe, at this point, when you look at all of them. that we've done, at least in the past 3 years. We've prosecuted, I can tell you from the prosecution side, we've prosecuted more narcotic sellers or people that possess with intent to sell during the last 2.5, 3 year period than any other period in the history of the county.
And are you seeing an effect on streets?
You see the effect one person at a time. At times the crime rate does go down, at times it makes a difference, but I look at it as being the people that say, you know, we appreciate what you're doing. There's people on that block yesterday that I know they came up to police officers and they told them, I was told, that they appreciate everything that happened. I know there's parents out there that appreciate what we're doing, that they believe that it saves lives. And I know for a fact from our from our diversion courts that these officers are making a difference. That's my answer to that.
I could speak short term for the recent raids that occurred in the city of Newburgh, that we have seen a difference already. In our raid with the FBI, there was a lot of violent individuals that are now not on the streets, and we see an immediate result from that. Last night I spoke to the commander of the midnight shift who said you could hear a pin drop last night. So there's definitely short term, and then it's our job with our law enforcement collaboration to make those short term, long term.
How would you describe the importance of this organization in the drug trafficking in Newburgh and in this area?
It's highly important. If it wasn't, all of us wouldn't be here addressing them. But they took over an entire block, and there's good people that live there in that community, and there's people that come in from outside of our community that purchase those items. We're at a 30% arrest rate, a weekly arrest rate, where it's people from outside of the city of Newburgh that are coming in to purchase drugs here, and that's contributing directly to the quality of life of the residents in the city of Newburgh. So this was a big operation. There's definitely going to be a difference in that neighborhood, and we're going to continue to make sure that that neighborhood stays that way as we move on to the other areas.
I'm not insensitive that, you know, were they the suppliers of these drugs in Newburgh, or were they just one of many sources?
Well, we still have work ahead of us, so that's the comment I'll make on that. So. And then anytime there's a void, people attempt to move in and try to pick up that void, and we're going to address those issues firsthand as well.
Chief, why are some of these raids involving the FBI and others not?
We have many law enforcement collaborations going on. There's the FBI Nexus is a federal crime case. So there's a lot more state crimes than there are federal crimes, and so we work with all of our law enforcement partners.
Can you please go over the flow chart again? You mentioned I think there are about 4 individuals. I don't have a spelling of their names because I can't see. Can you just start at the top?
Sure, okay. Your principal suppliers, Mr. Tejada, Christian Tejada from Howard Beach, was the principal supplier to Mr. Rivera, who was based in the city of Newburgh, who ran the boxing club. Mr. Rivera, in turn, supplied Earl Melvin. Earl Melvin ran the block, or controlled the block. He exercised command and control over the drug trade on the block. This side, the left side over here with Mr. Tejada and Mr. Rivera, this was what we call stamped or prepackaged heroin. It was already packaged. It was stamped with The Walking Dead. So this individual, Tejada and Rivera, supplied Mr. Melvin with that type of heroin. And sometimes it did have fentanyl in it. Over on this side here, we have Angel Rodriguez, who's based out of the Bronx. Mr. Rodriguez supplied Mr. Melvin with loose heroin. What I mean is unpackaged, not in a package in a little baggie or wax paper. That it was loose. So these are your 4: Mr. Angel Rodriguez, Earl Melvin, Ray Rivera, and Christian Tejada. Where Rodriguez, Rivera, and Tejada were the primary suppliers, but Melvin ran the organization on the block, with most everybody falling below him, and then ultimately down to the street sales. But again, while there is some organization from top to bottom, you have to understand it with the heroin trade, because heroin, the drug itself, has a low molecular weight, and there is so much of it, and it can be diluted so easily that everyone in this organization, whether they were a street seller, whether they were mid-level, whether they were the supplier, whether they were the main person, they're selling at a 100 to a 300% profit. that type of pyramid of, for lack of a better term, I'm going to use the term capitalism, exists nowhere else but in the drug trade. And the drug trade, if you're going to be doing that type of business with that type of money, what naturally follows is guns and violence. And obviously, as the chief said, that had been a hot spot for what?
Actually, past 3 years.
3 years.
Long-term hotspot for violence.
And again, I stress, what you're not seeing here today is the operation was of such a magnitude, it was an entire city block with multiple search warrant locations all up and down the block.
Which block?
City Terrace and
First Street from City Terrace to Carpenter.
the Carpenter.
So is it safe to say in that neighborhood, other blocks are going to have other gangs running their blocks and
I'll
stuff?
turn that over to the chief. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, like I said earlier, we recognize that where there is a void, there's going to be people there that want to move in. So we are now concentrating a lot of effort in that area. We're not just doing a sweep and then walking away and moving to the next one. We're looking for long-term strategies, and an example of that is how codes and fire department and officers are there on the street right now.
Isn't that a trend when they use them chasing some of the violence?
Well, these people are in jail, so
I'm just saying about the would-be followers who would want to take over this.
we have stamina. I mean, we have stamina and a law enforcement collaboration that's strong. So if they, just the crime analyst, we have a full-time crime analyst that identifies hotspots for us. We chase it on a weekly basis. So when we put people in those hotspot areas, yes, they do move to other areas, but we're on it. We meet weekly. We decide where to put our resources. We have limited resources in the City of Newburgh, so we have to utilize the data with our crime analysts to put people in the best spots that they need to be in. So if they're going to move, we'll chase them. We're willing to do that.
Money increases they were doing a week or month?
I can't comment on that right now.
Can you put a number to how much heroin was flowing through this organization?
I can't comment on that either.
And this is the second raid in the last week alone, followed by a bunch before that. I mean, what do you credit kind of this uptick and this good information from people who kind of feel comfortable coming forward,
Well,
whether anonymously or not?
it's the law enforcement's response to what's going on right now in the city. So we recognize that there's a lot of violence going on right now. Where there's drugs, there's violence. We spoke today about how we recovered handguns on this. I know when one of the entry teams entered one of the residents, a gun was thrown from it. So where there is drugs, there is violence. So we have to address it.
How many handguns do you use?
There's multiple handguns right now.
What does a sting operation like this do for morale in your department?
Well, I think it increases morale when we see that what we're doing is fruitful. I mean, this was a long-term investigation, but we're doing stuff every day. These things take 10 months, but our officers are on the street every day making a difference. But when they see the things that require long-term investigations are not something that the patrol officer can see on a daily basis. So when something like this goes down, they recognize that this collaboration is really all working towards the same goal. It's good to be on a team. When you know everybody is going in the same direction as you are, it does raise morale.
How many people are still wanted out of this raid?
6. And they're marked with red wanteds above their
Did
names.
their names go into the press releases that were issued?
I don't think so. You can't, I'm not exactly sure on that. I can speak to the chart. I know that, just the arrested.
Can we say that there are warrants out?
You can say that they're warranted, that we're actively looking for them, and we seek the public's help in locating them.
And for the most part, are they lower level players?
You have some mid-level and some low-level, but again, I'm going to caution you, you can't use low-level, mid-level, high-level, because the profit margin at every level is so great that even a low-level seller that buys $150 worth 3 times a week and then sells it for $450, at the end of the year, they're doing $50-some thousand worth of business.
Did all of those people that were named as part of that chain, that flip chart, they have been arrested?
If it went out in the state police press release, they've been arrested.
I think I missed this, but can you talk about what you seized from the house yesterday?
Chief? Which there was...
In terms of cash, which drugs, handguns, how
think Major, you had,
There were over $9,000 in cash, the total of about 1,200 bags of heroin. I believe it was 4.5 grams of loose heroin, and 2 handguns, a Smith & Wesson 40 caliber handgun, and a defaced high point 45 caliber. Defaced meaning that the serial number was, an attempt was made to obliterate the serial number on that weapon so that it would not be traceable.
So the new Malta Tues or semi-automatic?
I know the 40, I believe they both are semi-automatic handguns, yes.
Are these folks in gangs? Are these gang connected individuals?
So, as you're aware, we do group violence intervention strategies. So we call them groups. As far as an organized gang, as in Bloods, Latin Kings, we're saying no at this point, but they are a group. It's obvious, you can see by the flow chart, that they're involved in a criminal enterprise together.
Okay, so no known gang members are part of this.
Correct.
You said about the eight of the others who were the initial suppliers. Do we know where they're getting it? Is there a larger organization above them that they're looking at?
No, that we're not commenting on at this time. I mean, no cases, this is still an ongoing case.
So that's why y'all decided to call it the Operation Punch Out?
Yes.
And specifically Ray Rivera, someone that, I mean, we did a story on him a couple of years ago about him, a role model for young kids in the city, taught them self-discipline and respect, blah, blah, blah. For someone like him to be taken down, I mean, what did you say to the youth that looked up to him?
It's a shame. It really is. But he'll be held accountable, and what we have to teach the youth is if you do things like that, then you will be held accountable. And if you can't discipline yourself enough to stay out of the criminal element, then this is what happens. And there is nobody that can escape free, and law enforcement is watching. If you're going to dabble in that enterprise, then you're going to pay the price. And it could turn out to be actually a good lesson for the youth.
Can I ask if any of this heroin is connected to some of the overdoses that we've seen? There was a rash of heroin overdoses, opioid overdoses that we've taken place in town in Newburgh. Is this particular batch of drugs connected to that? Has anyone been able to make that connection so far?
It's really difficult, and we've seen this in other areas. I was in Syracuse and Buffalo within the last 2 weeks. Some of it was fentanyl laced, but it's very difficult to draw that link because of the distribution patterns, and you just don't always know. I mean, sometimes things might be stamped a certain way, but tracking it back to the particular dealer that sold it, and saying that particular batch of heroin is chemically identical to the one that was being sold by a dealer, it's a very difficult link to make.
Is it also true the individual car y'all told y'all still looking for him? Because I seen him on the warning.
If they're marked as wanted up here, then we're still looking for them.
Couple more questions, guys. Long term, now that they're back, and what are you guys doing to prevent resurgence of the storage?
So we're moving in right now with code compliance and everything to try to change that neighborhood. But believe it or not, increased patrols and foot patrol officers makes a big difference in the community. In our hotspot policing, we do that through our crime analysis identified areas. We have yet to have a violent incident occur when officers were in a hotspot doing a hotspot detail. So when you put police officers in those areas, it makes a difference. So you could expect in that area increased traffic checkpoints. You could expect increased foot patrol officers. You can expect pro-enforcement in that area, and just a mere presence.
But Dan, you could probably need to double your force.
Well, if you look behind me, this is what we have. I mean, it's especially even with our GIVE funding, that's a partnership with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and they're constantly in the city working with us through GIVE funding. So we do have limited resources, but we pursue every funding avenue that we can, and we're running a lot of special details through grant funding. So our officers do get tired, though, because we have a limited pool of who we're picking from, but they're out there and they're dedicated to make it safer.